I truly believe that you can do just about anything you want to with your entire life. That no dream is too big, no goal is too high. And I say just about, I put that specific caveat in there because inevitably when we have this conversation about dreams or goals or ambitions, opportunity, there's always that one knucklehead moron who says something to the effect of, but you're 5'9", are you saying if you just want it bad enough you can go to the NBA? No, of course not. Look at me. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to do that. But that's typically not the place that we find ourselves in. We're typically not guilty of dreaming too big, of exploring what we're fully capable of, and what we really need to do is scale it back and be a little more practical, be more reasonable. Typically, we find ourselves, maybe we're not challenging ourselves enough in what we're capable of. This came to light for me recently when I was doing an interview for the podcast. It's called Bold Future. I interview leaders. And I was talking with a guy named Kent Stewart. Kent's a local entrepreneur. He's an amazing man. And he's probably best known for the fact that he climbed the highest mountain peak on 6 of the 7 continents on the world. And the only one that he has left is Mount Everest, the highest mountain at 29,000 feet. Which is an amazing task. I just said 6 of the 7 continents, and that doesn't really mean anything to you, but when I started researching how difficult this task is, I had no idea how hard it is to climb these mountains. And so I looked into it, and it basically taxes you in every possible way that you can be taxed. Mentally, physically, emotionally, socially, any other thing that you can put Ali at the end of it, it probably is going to wear you out, just as a person putting yourself through it. He said there's a point at which you're climbing these mountains and you can barely even reach over to tie your boots if they come untied. It's a terrible task to do. So this is hard. This is a really big dream that he has for himself. And so I was talking to him about the lessons he's learned along the way and what we can learn from his mountain climbing experiences, because I have no desire to do that whatsoever. So I just want to bank on what he's trying to do. And the first thing that he told me was don't settle for small goals. He said, I've climbed all these mountains and I've had these wonderful, amazing experiences. I've got to climb most of these mountains with my wife, and I have those memories with her. I've climbed and I've made friends. And if I had not dreamed these big dreams, if I had not set for myself a huge goal, I wouldn't have done any of that. I wouldn't have these things in my life that I've been able to do. I wouldn't have these memories. I wouldn't be in this shape that I'm in at 60 years old now, even though he's still trying to climb Mount Everest. And that was a huge light for me, that there's a challenge for us to climb, to set for ourselves dreams that maybe are right outside of what we think is possible. There's 2 reasons that we don't do that. The first is simply that it's just more comfortable not to. It's so much easier just to do what we know, to do what we're comfortable with. We're creatures of comfort, creatures of habit. It's easy just to make a checklist of things and put stuff on there that we know we're going to be able to check off. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's done that at some point in my life. But we do that because it's easy, it's more comfortable. We want to do things that we know the expected outcome is actually going to happen for us. The second reason that we do that, and maybe we don't push ourselves in the way that we could, is just fear. We're afraid of failing. We're afraid of what if we put something out there. We say we're going to accomplish this big dream, and then we don't. What's going to happen? I can't even imagine that. But there's a reason that failure is something that we think about. And it's a pretty founded fear. Because if we're going to try to dream big dreams, if we're going to try to do big things, have big impact, and serve a lot of people in the world, inevitably, there's going to be some failure along the way. Without question, it's just part of the process. I can relate to this specifically for myself because I've failed a lot. I remember I graduated in Samford in 2005, so I have sat in not these exact chairs. When you come back to a place after 10 or 12 years, everything is different and everything is the same. I don't know how to communicate that any better way, but I've sat in these seats here, I've walked these halls, I've eaten that food, I jumped in that fountain and broke a flip-flop, which I'm still really upset about coming out of it, and the water was way too cold. It was a terrible idea. But I've been here, and I can tell you that along the way I had this dream that for me was huge. It was my kind of Mount Everest idea that I was going to start a company that was both profitable, where customers loved to buy and employees loved to work. Like, that was my thing. I thought, I'm going to do this. It will allow me to serve a lot of people. I'm going to go after it. I graduating from Samford, basically what I can tell you is from these seats here, where you are and where I was to where I'm standing now, the distance from here to here is just a lot of things that didn't work out. Just a lot of failure and a lot of things that didn't go the way that they were supposed to. I started a web development company, and it didn't work, and a branding firm, and it didn't really work, and a t-shirt company that was not a good idea, I should have never done that. I got a list of things, like I keep going on and on, it's just stuff that didn't really pan out. And so I can tell you that there's going to be some difficulty and some failure along the way when we decide to do these big things, but I believe it's worth it. So it's fast forward to 2015, a couple years ago, I had the opportunity to start this business called Breakout, some guys that I went to Samford with, and it's pretty simple. If you haven't been, it's an escape game. You put people in a room for an hour, they solve their way out using clues, puzzles, and codes, and they pay us to do that. So it's like a really fun business to be in. But we started that, and we put the first one was in Lexington. We partnered to bring one here in Birmingham. We put it here, went really well, so we decided we're going to do another one. We go down to Mobile, it went well, so we decided to do another one. We added one in Montgomery. So we've got these 3 stores here in the state of Alabama. And if we take a step back from that, if we look at what's actually happening here, we haven't perfected it. Everything doesn't go right every day. As a matter of fact, things go wrong all the time. But it's not a perfect business, but 3 things are happening. We're a profitable company, where customers love to buy, and employees love to work. And if I look back on what Kent was telling me from his explorations in mountain climbing, the things that he valued most were the journey along the way. The things that he became. And he said that these big dreams transform us. They transform us to be somebody different than who we are. We have to become someone different to reach these big dreams. And I can attest to the fact that's what's happened with me. At the same time, I started this podcast called Bold Future because I realized that I have a long way to go as a leader. If you're kind of like, well, I'm not sure if I'm a good leader or not, you can put a sign on your back that says, follow me, and then just hire a bunch of people, and you'll find out how many flaws you have. Like everything you can do wrong, I've done, communication errors, or things that just don't make sense looking back. So I knew I've got to become a better leader, which is where that podcast came from, the Bold Future podcast. So I would go, and I still do, talk to whoever I could find, people, everyone from big business CEOs to nonprofit executive directors and mountain climbers, kind of everybody in between. And as I look back on the last 2 seasons of what I've learned from these things, and what is the most valuable thing that I could share, there's 2 things that come to mind immediately when I think about all of the people that I've talked to. People who are doing big things, having big impact, and trying to start companies and grow companies and nonprofits. And there's 2 things that stand out. The first is what we've been talking about. They're people who dream a big dream. They have big goals. They have big ambitions. They want to touch a lot of lives. And the second thing that I've realized is that they are people who take massive action. And if we take the first part of this talk and that's all we have, it's a kind of a waste of time. Like just dreaming really doesn't mean anything. Just putting a big goal out there is kind of useless unless we're willing to take action on that. And the thing that's most interesting to me is the methodology that they go about doing this with, the way that they think about this. When you take a massive, huge goal in front of you, it can be super overwhelming. But the people that I have emulated or I seek to follow, the people that I've interviewed, they follow along with the same path that a mountain climber does. They break it down into its smallest possible parts and then just take a single step at a time. And that sounds kind of trite to me. It sounds like, why am I even sharing that? That's not even that valuable. But it's a huge lesson for us to learn that when we have these big things, these Mount Everests that we want to achieve in our life, things that we want to do, the way to do it is just to turn it into something really small. That's how the podcast got started. I have this big, huge, really kind of outrageous goal. Like I wanted to, and I still do, interview people at the top of the top. I want to interview LeBron James. If you haven't guessed, I do not know him. I have no connection to LeBron James at all. I already told you I'm not going to the NBA, so that route's kind of like, that's out. I don't know his people. I don't even know who I would reach out to get a rejection from him. Right? Like I'm so far from that goal. But what I can do, undeniably, I know I can get on Amazon and just buy a microphone. Right? Like, I did that and immediately I was one step closer. Now, it's a small step, and we might call it a micro step, but I'm closer than where I was. And I can reach out to a local entrepreneur and I can ask him if I can interview him. Now I've taken 2 steps, I'm a lot closer than I was before. And it sounds crazy to think that we're going to celebrate those 2 little steps that don't really make that much of a difference. But the thing about taking those small steps, move this again. The thing about taking those small steps is that they create momentum for us. And the thing that's valuable about momentum is it is absolutely necessary when the inevitable wall comes. Because the wall of resistance is absolutely going to come for us. We know that there's going to be things that get in our way. There are going to be negative people. There are going to be circumstances. The economy is going to change. There's an infinite number of things that are going to happen when you've got something that you're visualizing that you think you want to do with your life. It's going to happen. But when we've taken these small steps, we create momentum to push through that wall. Instead of just hitting it, it's going to punch you in the face, and you're going to fall down, and then you're just going to get up and walk away, and you're going to go do something else that you don't really want to be doing. That's a sad path, so let's don't do that. But there's momentum in that. And the way that I think we can best rig this in our favor is a way that my friend Caleb Chance, a guy I did another podcast interview with. He's a musician, he's a photographer, he's just a general crazy man. He does all kinds of things in the city of Birmingham. And he was putting on this concert series. It was super complicated, and there was tons of musicians involved. And musicians, if you're a musician, I'm sorry, but they're the worst people to organize because they want to go do their own thing and express themselves, and all that stuff. And so he was trying to do that, and I was asking him about how he was pulling that off because he kept doing it, and it kept going well. And he said, well, I really have just changed the definition of success for myself, and that is the success is in the doing. Instead of trying to perfect everything that we do, instead of trying to make sure that we hit every single note every time, or that we're going to provide the most ridiculous experience, let's just do it. Let's do the work, and then let's do it again and make it better, and do it again and make it better. And that has been a huge, huge asset for me in thinking about how do we get these big things done. Okay, so let's bring it to something that's more applicable for you. You're here, you're at Samford University. You may have an idea of what it is that one day you want to do with your life. You may not. You're in college, so who knows where you are on that spectrum. But there's a chance that you've got at least some dream job or career or company or organization you want to be involved in. You've got something there. But that's way too big. It's overwhelming. There's not enough. It's too esoteric. It's generic. We can't get our head around that. So let's break that down even further. What do we know is most likely going to happen? We're probably not going to step out of here, graduating, and then go just fulfill our dream. There's probably going to be a bit of a process there, which means you're probably just going to get a job working for someone else, which is a totally fine path to do. That's what I did for part of the time. You're probably going to go work for someone else. Well, that's still, like, getting a job, if you've ever talked to anyone who's trying to do that, is a super overwhelming task, and no one really knows how to do it. Let's break it down even further. Whether you look at an industry, well, that's still like, it's just too big. I've chosen real estate, but now what? Am I going to buy? Am I going to sell? What am I going to work for? But the thing that you know you can do is you can find somebody in that industry and you can email them and you can say, I'm a college student. I have no idea what I want to do with my life, but I'd like to talk to you about what you do every day, how you work, what you do. And because you're a college student and you're not a threat to them, you have nothing to sell them, they're going to most likely 85 to 95% of the time say yes because they feel like they're giving back to the future of America or something like that. And it's true. I guarantee you, if you do that, they will say yes. And what we've done there is we've taken this kind of like vague, maybe it's a dream, I don't know what I want to do with my life, down to like, we're just talking about sending an email. Like, you can do that, and you can do that over and over again. You don't have to have a perfect email sent out. You can follow that process. So there's two things I'm asking you to do. As you spend the rest of your time here at Samford, whatever year you are, on one side over here, I'm asking you to expand something. To think as big as you can, to not eliminate ideas that you have, to not crush your own dreams before you've even had a chance to get them out of the gate. I'm asking you to think about what's possible and maybe what's not possible, and let's try to do that anyway. Because there's an incredible amount of meaning and reward when we allow ourselves to do that. I want to encourage you to dream really big. But then on the other side, I'm asking you to do essentially exactly the opposite. I'm asking you to think really small. I'm asking you to think and how you can break that big thing down into its smallest possible parts so that you can take action and get momentum moving towards those things. I'm not coming to you guys today saying, I am this amazing entrepreneur and I've made all this money and I've got a podcast that has millions of people listening. I don't have any of that. But what I am telling you is something that I wish someone had told me 10 or 12 years ago, however long it's been. And that's that there is an incredible power in dreaming big and acting small. And I know that this philosophy has completely changed the trajectory of my life in a very positive way. And I believe it will do exactly the same thing for you. Thank you.